Hey Bears, I'm Cole West, and I'm here with school board member Mr. Chad Karl. How you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for inviting me. This is going to be an interesting experience. I kind of looked at some of the stuff you had, and I was like, wow, this is going to be a lot more than I thought. I thought it was going to be a hello. You got some real good questions there.
Oh yeah, why thank you. So of course I got to ask, where are you originally from?
I tell people East Coast, so I'm kind of a nomad. I was born in Connecticut, moved around a lot when I was little. I kind of grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, right outside Philadelphia. So I grew up being like a Philadelphia Eagles, Flyers sports fan. You have no desire to go back, but you still kind of hold where you grew up.
Home is home.
I moved in between 8th and 9th grade to outside Richmond, Virginia. Went to 2 years of high school there, and then my parents moved again and moved up to Rhode Island. I graduated high school there. Didn't really like the Northeast, wanted to come south, and I went to, decided to go to Georgia Tech. They had a good engineering program. I was able to wrestle there, and it was in the South. I kind of liked that. And with the exception of a year in Chicago, I've been in Georgia for like 20 years. And then our own family moved, brought us up here to Lebanon, and been here about 9-10 years, and have really enjoyed it. Absolutely.
So you said that you moved around a lot.
Yes.
How would you describe your experience in high school, even though that you moved around so much?
It was interesting. So when you move around, you don't have that network of friends you grew up with. You don't have that lifelong friends. But it does make you realize you have to become outgoing. You have to go meet people, and you also realize not everything's that bad. It'll be fine. The other thing that was kind of nice, it gives you a little chance to reinvent yourself. Especially in those high school years, you change every year, and so you can kind of reinvent yourself a little bit.
Absolutely.
I was lucky enough to be a good athlete. I wrestled, so I kind of had at least a small group of friends that I could break into. And I was an average student. I should have been better than I was. I'm not going to act like I was a great straight A student.
Oh yeah.
But I adapted well.
So, I mean, nobody goes to school and says, I want to be a school board member when I grow up. I mean, what were your original career goals in high school?
It's kind of funny. When I look back at, you look at the little school board things or the school things and school picture. And I always wrote down, I want to be a scientist or a football player. Well, I'm 5'7", 160 pounds.
Really
I wasn't going to be a football player. And I didn't know what an engineer was at that time. So as I got older, I loved math, I loved science, and so I started looking at, I want to be an engineer. So when I graduated, I looked for colleges where, at the time I was a wrestler, so I wanted to wrestle, and I wanted to get a good engineering school. And Georgia Tech just fit. It kind of clicked all the boxes, and so I didn't know what type of engineer I necessarily wanted to be.
Exactly.
But really what I tell people is an engineering degree is a degree in math and problem solving, and you can apply it anywhere.
So you stayed at Georgia Tech for all 4 years?
Yeah, actually, again, I don't want to say what a great student I was. I didn't quite get out in 4 years. I went a little long. I changed majors and dropped a couple classes and had to pick up. So I stayed a couple extra football seasons. But so I was at Georgia Tech my whole career.
And how would you describe that experience, particularly because that was the first time that you stayed somewhere for a decent amount of time?
I liked it. I really, Georgia Tech's actually in the heart of Atlanta, so you kind of, you get a, it's nice because you have the Georgia Tech as a college, you have Georgia Tech as a society, and then if you wanted to break out of that, you had different parts of Atlanta you could go to, so it was pretty easy.
So what career path did you end up going after Georgia Tech?
It's like when you graduate, like anybody else, you're panicked to get a job. Like I just want to get a job. And so I was a textile engineer, and it's surprising that I did not end up in the carpet industry, which is very prevalent in North Georgia and South Carolina. So companies like Shaw and Milliken and stuff like that were always hiring. And sometimes it's luck of the draw. When I graduated, it was right about the time NAFTA started, and so a lot of textile jobs went to Mexico and other places.
Yeah.
So it kind of changed the dynamic, and I got a job, believe it or not, selling ink. Like that you print with in Chicago.
Yeah.
So I kind of got into that, and then that got me into the packaging industry. So by selling ink, you put it on paper. Then I worked for a paper company. We made boxes like 12 packs and 6 packs and grocery store items. I worked on machinery. I got into technical sales and maintenance, where you actually work on either packaging equipment or printing equipment, like in a plant. So I kind of used a little bit of my engineering degree, got my hands dirty a little bit, kind of being a glorified mechanic.
Yeah.
And then worked my way up through sales. So I've been in but I've been in that kind of packaging or manufacturing industry my whole life.
So, I mean, how did you end up on the school board after that?
That's an interesting question. I had no desire to like, oh yeah, this is what I want to be. Really where it came about was I went through a program, when I came up here, a program called Leadership Wilson, which a lot of people go through. Great program. And they just kind of give you a smattering of what's going on in the county. And so you meet county leaders, you see stuff. And one of the things they make you do is you have what they call homework assignments. And so you have to go to a school board meeting, a county commission meeting, a city council meeting.
However, this is all voluntary, correct?
It's voluntary, right?
Yeah.
So you choose, and it's usually I think about 30 people. There's a class each year, and you get to know these people who are all kind of either county leaders or civic leaders, and it's just a smattering. There may be a pastor on it. There may be somebody that works for the YMCA. There may be some local business leaders.
So why did you choose to go on it?
I just wanted to get involved. I was heavily involved in my church. I've always liked volunteer civic type things. And so I kind of went there just to kind of get to know people in the county and look at all these different opportunities. And so it kind of shows you all the different from civic leagues and organizations, and volunteer organizations that are philanthropic, to the political side of it, to the business leaders, to what, to the schools and everything else. And so one of the things that was very interesting was when I sat through a school board meeting, it was, I'd just say it was interesting. And from my view, they were very down in the weeds on some stuff, and it was interesting just going to a meeting. And so I kind of got interested in that. My kids were in school here. I've always been a fan of public schools.
Oh, yeah.
And so when the Zone 7 seat, when they changed to open it up and that became an open seat, I decided to run for that seat. When I ran, I lost to Larry Inman by 24 votes. So I'd never run an election before. I had no idea what I was doing. But it was a very interesting experience. Even losing, you met a lot of people. I met people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. Some of them I still consider friends now, and kind of consider that done. And then when
you're on the district now, so.
Yeah, and so then Mr. Inman had left the district, and they opened the seat back up. And then that's when I run, and I won by 2 votes. So I've been on both sides of a very close election. And so now I'm just doing the best I can as a member.
Absolutely. So when you first took office, what were some of the first discussions that you decided to try to engage in?
Part of it is just kind of absorbing, and what you realize with the school system is, from afar you think, oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to talk to parents and teachers and students, and that's a necessary part of it.
It is.
But what you realize is you also have to talk upstream to state legislatures and county leaders and county commission members, because they're the people that fund the money. So you need to kind of have this balance of understanding the teachers and the students of what their need is, understanding the parents and kind of what their need is, and they're the voters and they dictate it, but then also trying to articulate at a higher level what laws or what funding will help you run the schools. And so it's kind of a 3-way balance of catching all those conversations and bringing them together.
Now, I understand that one of the first topics that you decided to discuss openly on social media when you won Zone 7 was the SEEK program.
Yes.
Why did you decide to first start with that?
It was, at the time, they were talking about doing away with it in middle school.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great program. I went through something similar called SEEK. We called it the resource program when I was younger. Both my kids were in SEEK. They were in Georgia when they were in school, they were in a similar gifted program. And I think it's a great thing where you can let kids experience it. And within SEEK is, a lot of people have a concept of gifted programs being good students. And it's not always that. It's a way, it's almost, I tell people, like, a gifted child is almost like a special ed child in that they think and learn differently.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the box of learning doesn't work. And I think once you get to high school, kids have a little more view of their career. They have the CTE programs, but up through middle school, you're kind of cored into a certain group. And I think I didn't want it to be taken away, because I think it's an outlet for a lot of kids to kind of be around other kids that think differently. And explore themselves in kind of a safe area.
Absolutely.
And I actually was very impressed with the West Wilson Middle program, and I actually volunteered to teach whenever they had something that was technical, engineering topics or anything about bridges or structures or seven simple machines. And so I kind of pretend to be a teacher for a day.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm not a teacher. I'm not going to, you know, it's a hard job.
Oh, yeah.
But I would pretend to be a teacher for a day, and because it's a SEEK program, it worked for me, so I'd bring in hands-on stuff. So we'd learn about pulleys, and we'd build a pulley system or a lever, and you know, so I'd talk about that. And I've continued to do that where asked in some groups.
In your situation, you're not required to be personally engaged with everything. You're just there to help make votes. However, why do you try to be so involved?
I think the answer to anything, and again, this is probably me being an engineer, the more you know, the better decisions you can make. So when I try to make a decision, I have what my preconceived notion, what I think is right, but I like to reach out to different people. And some of those are students, some of those are teachers, principals, voters. They're not all going to agree, and you try to take what you heard from them, and if you're really good and have enough time, you try to get the conversation with those people, even people that disagree with you, to get to the why.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you have a conversation, you get to why, it gives you a better viewpoint of what the right answer is.
Absolutely. So when you are now still on Zone 7, what are some of the biggest and most difficult decisions you've had to make so far?
There's a lot. I mean, one of them going on right now is the rezoning issue, and there's not a perfect answer, unfortunately. You know, you know, certain people will look in their case, you know, they want everybody to stay at a school, and some people want everybody to move. And I think there's probably a right answer in there where every child is different.
Absolutely.
In those cases, what I go back to is there's a school board oath that we take, and it has a lot of things on there. But the first one is, in all cases, do what's best for the children. And so I try to relate to that, and I've made some tough decisions. You know, in funding or redistricting or the calendar or other things, and you have to, you know, you're not going to make everybody happy.
Absolutely.
But you try to do what you think is best for the student in those cases.
Now, you mentioned funding. Green Hill High School is now getting upwards of a $300 million project, last time I checked.
It shouldn't be that much. It should be, it was about well, depending on how you do the math, it should have been about $110 million.
Sorry.
Now, that $110 million is, we're not writing a check for $110 million.
No.
It's a 20-year bond. And so you're probably paying $5 million a year over 20 years to kind of cover that, like you would with a mortgage on your house or anything else. So sometimes we throw
$5 million
but you're right. And sometimes we get in, people throw numbers around, and there's like two different budgets within the school system. So shifting gears a little bit, there's the operational budget, which is a year-by-year budget, and that's everything it takes to run. So your power, your lights, your teachers, your buses, your cafeteria workers, all of those things that are paid every year, that's your operating budget. And that's probably a $200 to $300 million budget, depending on, there's lots of different budgets that add up. And then there's the capital budget, which is what pays for buying the buses and all the schools being the biggest thing. And if you buy a new school, you add another bond, and you're still paying on things that were, you know, you're probably still paying on Wilson Central and other high schools until that 20-year bond is up, just like you would a house and a mortgage. So sometimes we throw money around like that, but you're right, it's a big decision because it's county taxpayer money. We don't want to be dumb with it, but we also want to provide the best education that we can. And one of the things I try to tell people and constituents is, if you look at really good communities, there's two things they have to have. And you have to have employment opportunity. People need a job, and you have to have a good school system, good public school system. And if you look at places that really, communities that fell apart, they lost one of the two of those, and they kind of go hand in hand. So Wilson Central is doing a great, or Wilson County is doing a great job of bringing in business. You know, housing values going up. Most people are doing well. We need to keep the schools up as well.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned taxpayer money.
Yeah.
I understand when it came time to start funding for the new Green Hill High School project, you were a huge advocate for the liquor tax. Would you mind explaining what that is?
There's two things. So the liquor tax that's a lawsuit that just finished up.
Okay.
So that was, that's just been resolved. That was something that funds a little bit. It's the 0.5% sales tax. So, and that's coming up. Interesting you bring that up. I was an advocate for that. It failed 51%, 49%. 50,
so
it was real close. And so it's up again. They did put a caveat on there to help pass it that, and it would have happened anyway, is that the money for that would go to teacher raises, which we desperately need. So right now, any tax in Wilson County, I think, is 9.5%, and it would go up to 9.75%. I may be off on the numbers, but it's going to go up 0.5%. on anything bought in the county. And now, the way the money goes is a little different. Some of that, if it's bought in the city, some goes to the city, some goes to the county. But the net of it is, if you bought something for $100, it would cost 50 cents more.
Yeah.
And a good portion of that would come back to the school system. And the guess is it would be about $5 million a year coming back to the school system, which is enough to fund the $4 million for teacher raises that we wanted. So one of the big reasons for a sales tax is if you have a property tax, the burden is on your residents. If you have a sales tax, it's anybody coming through Wilson County. So you're not putting the burden just on those people.
Absolutely.
So it's just a way to get, and one of the things as a school board member that I think you have to do is you have to fight for funding where you can. And so I try to fight that at the state level. If talking to our reps, if there's, if they can fund more programs, if they can fully fund school nurses and counselors that we don't have to pay locally, we can use our local money for other things.
Yeah. So you are an advocate for adding more salary to teachers.
I am. And I think money by itself doesn't do anything, but I'd like to pay our teachers more because, there's several reasons. But the first is Wilson County has demonstrated really good performance. So we've asked our teachers to, generate good kids. Programs like this cost money. You don't get them at every high school. And they're really, really well done. So between our CTE programs, between the test scores, and Wilson County was an exemplary status. I think Mount Juliet High School is a reward. You had your banner for being a reward school, and I think there were 9 of them through the county. But overall, we had so many, and everybody did well. Where as a county, we were given exemplary status, which is kind of like reward status for a whole county. And we were one of the few large school districts to get that. It was Williamson County, ourselves, and then there were a couple others down there, but we were the second largest district to get that. And that's all student and teacher based.
Absolutely.
And so the teachers did a lot of work to get that. And to me, it's not fair to not pay your teacher. To ask them to do something and then they achieve and not pay them is not fair. Now, what a lot of people don't understand, there's a relationship between the county commission and the school board. The school board only has so much money, and we're given that by the state, by some federal, and then by the county. And we're thankful for what they give us, and they give us a lot. But if you want to increase those salaries, you have to get the money from somewhere. And so I posted something on my social media page today, or I guess last night, that showed, numbers can get thrown around. And so the best metric I had is cost, number of dollars spent per student. Because in a big district or a small district can kind of be compared a little bit. And so Wilson County, as a district, spends about $8,600 per student.
For like their entire school career?
Well, just for that year. So we have 18 to 19,000 students. When you add up the whole budget, you divide it. It's about $8,600 per student.
Wow, yeah.
The state average is over 10,000.
Okay, so we're keeping it under.
We're under.
Yeah.
And the surrounding counties are about 9,100. So Rutherford, Williamson. So we're about $500 per student behind in spend, which is a great thing as far as being fiscally conservative and managing your money well. So I think Wilson County does a great job managing their money.
If we had the other $500, what would we be able to change?
That's where your teacher raises come in, and that's why I think if we can get to that even playing field, you could actually, so then your teacher salary could come up comparable to other places. You'd be able to do teacher raises. You'd be able to offer more things. You'd be able to, programs like CTE programs, programs like this, they cost money because there's equipment needed.
Absolutely.
There's instruction needed. It's a smaller student to teacher ratio. So they kind of cost money to do, but they're great programs. Absolutely. And so I'd like to continue to do that. I mean, I would love it to be if there was a way where you didn't have to do bake sales for everything. If everything was funded, because some kids don't have the money to go on trips.
Yeah.
Not every family can afford a $500 trip or uniform or band trip. And so it'd be great if we as a county could fund those things, within reason, and have experience for students.
And the money has to come from somewhere. And you mentioned that you had to speak with state representatives, so you have to grow close relationships with representatives.
Yes.
You've never been a politician before in your life. How has that changed?
I mean, I've always followed politics, but I've never been a politician. And I don't want to be a politician, but I have to understand where they're coming from. And they get a lot of pressure because there's people that want their taxes low.
Oh, yeah.
And so you have to articulate where where you want to do this. So you do have to have conversations. And there's some things I agree with them, and there's some things I don't. But the key is to have the conversation. I will give a shout out to Senator Pody. He and I disagree on a lot of things, but I feel like we can have an honest conversation. There's no animosity. We can explain. We disagreed on the voucher issue. I talked to Senator Boyd about that as well.
Would you mind explaining what the voucher issue
is?
Okay,
the voucher issue, that was my big hot button issue last year. And I was fighting for it for funding for students. So Governor Lee came in, and he was a big proponent of a voucher system. They don't call it voucher; they call it an educational savings account. But it's because they don't like the word voucher.
Yeah.
And that was basically where somebody could, and they put some caveats around it. But in general, what a voucher ESA system is, somebody could say, I don't like my public school. I want you to give me the money that you would give me to go to public school to go to private school. And so the way it was written was a student could, but I think it was only in areas. So it was only in metro or underperforming areas.
Yeah.
It didn't affect Wilson County is what the argument to me was, but I tell them it did because it comes out of state money. So they want to allocate about $125 million of the state pool of educational money, which I think they should have given to the public schools to give kids who were maybe zoned for a failing school or what they called a failing school, could then take the $7,000 or whatever they were being given, and then apply that to a private school. Well, the problem comes down to you start picking winners and losers, and the state only gives us about $4,500 per student. I'd love them to give us $7,000,
Oh, yeah.
like the voucher was saying. So they only give us $4,500 in Wilson County, or about that. And most private schools, a good private school, you're not going to be able to meet that with $7,000. So you're still. So to me, it was going to get abused, and I felt like it was going to get abused where people are going to go to private school anyway. We're just going to take that money and go.
Yeah.
And then when you have Tennessee as a state being the 45th lowest funded education state, it performs better than that. It performs more the middle of the pack, but you're the 45th lowest.
Yeah.
You want to tell the state, and we're good in a fiscal area. So again, I want to fight for those types of things, and I think so. That was the voucher thing, or the voucher issue, and it ended up passing the House by one vote in what a lot of people think was a very controversial vote.
So in other conversation, you had to vote on the location of the new high school.
Yes.
That was a big deal, and
was.
it still is to this day. What is your particular thoughts on that?
I think they did a good job, and everybody had an idea of where it could be. And the best thing they did was they came up, and I shared this with some people, and actually changed their mind when they looked at it, what they called a heat map. So they kind of they put a little red dot where everybody lived. And when you looked at it, and you looked at where the schools were now, you said, I know that's not where necessarily the growth is, but it's where the kids are now.
Yeah.
And you also didn't have a choice of land everywhere. You couldn't say, oh, it's perfectly this spot, because you needed a big contiguous piece of land.
Oh, yeah.
So with the options we had, it made the most sense. And I think a lot of people were concerned about traffic, but I think what's going to happen is all of those people that drive through that Lakeview, Green Hill area, they're coming to Mount Juliet every day. So when they're going to have, instead of a 6 mile commute, they're going to have a little 2 mile commute. So I think 80% of the students lived in a 2 mile area. So there's going to be a shorter commute. So I think the traffic won't be as bad. The other thing they did with the school is they benchmarked other schools, and so from the design of the school, the flow of traffic, they tried to take the best practices and actually build a loop to get traffic off the road. So I think traffic will be less.
Yeah, I noticed that they have a little ramp on the side off of Lebanon Road.
Right. So they tried to have a couple different entrances. When you come off Lebanon, you come off Green Hill, and I think there's another entrance.
Yeah.
And then they had that nice loop around there where you're not backing up traffic right out of the gate.
So how does the school system go about buying a piece of land, especially of that size?
It's a great question. I'm still trying to figure it out because I came in on the tail end of this. So when I came in, we were I think it had been approved, but we were still going through some approval processes. We're going to have to continue to do it. And I'm a big proponent right now of going out and seeking land and buying it ahead of time, because the land is cheap, the high school expensive. So in Green Hill's case, I think we bought the land for around $6 million. The overall high school project was about $110. So you can buy the land and then at least you have it. Because what's going to happen over time is land's going to disappear. It's going to become a Kroger or a Publix or a apartments or a subdivision or something.
Yeah.
It's going to get. So we probably need to look at the growth and start planning for having some land. And we do have a little bit of land for an elementary school that could be done in the future, but we don't have anything else for a high school. So
Yeah.
But the Green Hill plan was. You just have to pick something. Ideally, you're ahead of it. We were probably 2 years behind doing it when we should have done it. And I think we could have done it in a more timely manner.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to commit to the money. So it's between what's
money.
right and people protecting money. There's, not everybody sees the same thing. And at some point, people agree to it and we move forward.
And after coming here and visiting, I'm sure you've seen how crowded this school is and our need for it.
I'm aware of it.
Are there any other schools within the county that you believe are overcrowded?
Right now, Mount Juliet's definitely the most overcrowded.
Absolutely.
Wilson Central and Lebanon are close right now. Now, when they rezone everything and move and bring Green Hills online, it'll settle out. Green Hill, Mount Juliet, and Wilson Central will have room. Lebanon's still going to be very, very full. They're not taking that many out of Lebanon, so with the growth projected, we'll probably need another high school in 4, 5, 6 years, and we'll be going through the same thing again. Where do we put it? What do we do? How do we zone it? It'll be the same process again. But people are moving into Wilson County. They keep moving into Wilson County. We have to teach them somewhere. We need a building to do that.
Exactly. To finish this off,
Yeah.
I have a quote from an anonymous commenter online about Wilson County schools. They write, "Dr. Wright genuinely cares about all of her students. We would take her leadership classes whenever they were offered. I learned much and made a friend in the process as well. Good luck in Williamson County."
Wow.
So what are your thoughts after having a close personal relationship with Donna Wright as well?
Donna is she's a very good leader. I think her detractors she comes across very strong leadership, but she gets things done. And so what I think is people that gravitate to Donna are typically type A personality people. They're very driven. So she's not afraid to set a goal. We're going to go get it. I've heard from a lot, and I've said this publicly, when I try to get a pulse of something, I go to the principals a lot because the principals are in a great spot to understand what the central office and Donna is saying and understand what the students are saying.
Yeah.
And most of them are very complimentary. I've actually had some of them say, best boss I've ever had. But I do think Donna's a great leader. She's not afraid to set goals, and then she actually has plans to get there. We have we review it. It's probably not published as much, but we have a 5-year strategic plan of how are we going to move ACT scores? How are we going to educate our children? How are we going to have kids ready for college, CTE programs? And there's steps to get there. Now, there's details we have to do of how do you fund those? How do you make it happen? How do you get the resources to do that? But we start checking off those boxes. And you may not hit all of them, but you strive for it. But she's a very good leader, and she does care about every student. And basically to every student reach their potential. And she's a big advocate too of spending time with the schools, and she's told a lot of state legislatures, Mount Juliet specifically, of kids want more. They want to be challenged. They don't want to have an easy class. They want hard classes. They want to be challenged. They want to learn. They're very competitive, and they want to be the best they can.
Absolutely. All right, thank you so much for coming with us today. You have a
Hey, I
great
appreciate
day.
it. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.